thank you for coming. Now, this is the first memorial we've ever hosted, so I'd just like to apologize in advance if the wheels just come off the bus at some point. If it does, don't panic. Everybody just stay calm. Just stay here until the grief counselors get here. They're standing by in the alley to work us through it. But actually, that's not going to happen because Lori is the real hostess of the evening, the one who is providing this wonderful spread. So we are in very, very good hands. And so without further ado, Miss Lori Paris.
Thanks, you guys. I'll try and get through this. And I'm so glad every single one of you is here. You're John's family, and that's why you're here. Thanks, Tony. Welcome, and thanks for coming to celebrate John. Some people flew in and some simply walked next door. Both say cool things about John and the quality of his friendships. This is a special place. It's been the LA family homestead thanks to Richard and Cheryl and their gracious hospitality over the past couple of decades. I'm so grateful for what you've given me and my brother. John Paris had a calling, and that was to be John Paris. His sudden departure sparked an outpouring of shock, love, and tributes that started to put words to the loss, and to celebrate the infinite gains of being on this planet at the same time and space that he was. Sorry, this is gonna be long, you guys. Angelo, where are you? Angelo wrote, "To be 15, emotionally lost, wounded, and angry, and to be found on the early web by Jim Griffin and immediately introduced to John Paris is the kind of thing that can really change a life. I was that lucky." Angelo prompted me to think about when I first met John, and I wrote back to Angelo, "To be 1 day old and immediately introduced to a toddler who just 3 weeks later would shove an entire roll of toilet paper into the toilet, then head out onto the suburban sidewalks like he knows where the hell he's going, or doesn't and likes it that way, is the kind of thing that can really change a life. I was that lucky." In fact, it was the greatest stroke of luck in my life that I got to have John Paris as a brother. I got to be in his orbit every day of my life until 53 days ago. He was the biggest influence in forming my sense of humor and my sense of possibility. When I was in 3rd grade, John told me I'd been talking in my sleep and heavily implied that I'd been revealing all sorts of things. We didn't, you're in 3rd grade, what are you saying? We didn't share a bedroom, so I should have flagged it right there, but he said he'd prove it using the new tape recorder we'd just bought together. I was nervous and curious to hear what embarrassing secrets I'd been giving up. The next morning he pressed play, and it was him clearly poking me awake and me whining, "Leave me alone." But to him, he hadn't been bluffing. This was the new technology, and he was very excited about it. John's always been an early adopter. He started writing computer programs in 1975. But he was hacking systems and creating workarounds even before technology got involved. At Michigan State, registering for classes meant hours in a maze of lines where you physically walked paperwork around. I was resigned to it, but John was like, "No, you duck through this door, up this hallway, skip the gymnasium, and you'll be done in 15 minutes. John loved to buck a ridiculous system. By example, he taught me to question authority and to not merely follow, but look for the impish improvements. He ran everything through his unique computer of a brain. Thought I'm gonna miss that. The Michiganders here know and love Meyer's Thrifty Acres, which was a precursor of Costco that boasted an acre of store under one roof. On our shopping pilgrimages, John made me stop the car in the parking lot so we could gaze upon the floor-to-ceiling windows outside of which were plants and potting soil. He said, "You know what this is?" I said, "The garden section." He said, "That's where the fire trucks drive through in the event of a fire so they can get to the middle of the store." Who thinks like that? My brother, my freshman mind was blown. John was a visionary, sometimes quietly, sometimes fearlessly, always passionately. He was that Gary Larson cartoon where a bunch of sheep are grazing, and one stands on its hind legs and throws itself in the air and says, wait, listen to me, we don't have to be just sheep." He took on big ideas that others push aside for the everyday. He considered the challenges of the world and maintained hope, always hope, that the better angels of our nature would inch us forward. He'd get frustrated and upset, but he never bogged down or gave in to despair, maybe because he viewed everything through a lens of possibility and humor. His workspace had a bunch of notebooks filled with company names, product names, ideas. When setting up passwords, he didn't just use a name or a date. It was an opportunity for an anagram or a code or a puzzle. I came across a page where he had written, "Nothing in life is certain except death or taxes," and the first of each letter was underlined. That had to have been his IRS password. John graduated college and worked for a year making brake shoes so that he and his friend Dave could travel the country before deciding where they wanted to live. Lucky for me, that was Los Angeles. Here, he expanded our family to include all of you, which is another immense gift he gave me. In his love hierarchy, I think number 1 was family and number 2 was ideas. I miss John so much. I miss being able to call him and hear what he's thinking. I miss seeing that sly smile that's part Vulcan mind meld. I think I know exactly what he's thinking. And part mystery. He just as often would surprise me with an insight beyond the dots anyone else might have connected. I miss having access to that beautiful heart and brain, and I've tried to comfort myself that he was such a part of who I am that I could just guess what his reaction would be. But that was one of the joys of John. He had such unexpected thoughts and would go places it didn't even occur to anyone else to go. It makes total sense that he loved space. It was vast and surprising and an endless source of discovery. His last couple weeks he would call me in the afternoons and we'd have long conversations about politics in the world and how crazy things have gotten. And no matter the discouraging news of the day, John would have a hopeful take. Not in a Pollyanna way, but because he was thinking 5 steps ahead, and because he believed in the better angels of our nature. He was always that toddler who took off down the block, excited to see what's around the next corner. And now, as Steve put it, he knows all the things we don't. And I bet he's excited to share it with us. The last exchange John and I had was by email. I told him I was surprisingly uncomfortable producing a little indie pilot for the first time. And he wrote back, "What are you talking about? You jumped out of an airplane." He signed it with a little airplane emoji. His last words to me were pure encouragement and belief. And that's the kind of luck it is to know John Paris. I've got to believe John has headed out into the vast forever the same way he hit the streets as a toddler, with courage and curiosity and delight in each discovery. We'd love to hear people's thoughts, memories, and experiences. Cheryl has transformed her office into a story booth so that John's friends all over the world can watch tributes via Periscope. There are also cards and letters people have sent if you'd like to grab one and read it to the Periscope crowd. We'll start that at 8 o'clock. Thanks again for being here to celebrate John, and thank you for loving him.
Well, I knew Laurie Paris was going to be a tough act to follow, so I hired some F-16s to fly by and give us all the chills. But I'm now starting to realize that those guys probably weren't real pilots. I probably should have known when they wore their jumpsuits to the walkthrough. I won't do that again. I can assure you that right now. So I'm just going to have to jump in. Laurie mentioned it earlier. John Paris was an early adopter. And while I don't think any of us will ever fully understand why death had to be his next big idea, I think we can all agree that this new venture of his has already changed the world. Our world. The one that will never be the same without it. I mean, I know I see things a little differently now. And John Paris was all about getting people to see things a little differently. In fact, he stood in this very yard on Thanksgiving Day at least 15 different times, talking about our world, sharing his insight, and debating what else we could possibly inject into a turkey before dropping it into a deep fryer. He was, after all, the man who brought us the dessert geek. The man who dropped a 4th turkey into that deep fryer while the rest of us were busy eating the other 3 he had already marinated. A 4th turkey that he actually injected with a concoction of nutmeg, cinnamon, and eggnog. Now, there's a reason that people tend to eat pie after Thanksgiving dinner and not another turkey that tastes somewhat like pie. There are three things I will never forget about Johnny P. His laugh, that smile beneath those two outrageously blue eyes, and the taste of that dessert cake. Now, for those of you who didn't experience the dessert cake, do not get sentimental and try to recreate this at home, okay? Pie is not broken. Pie is pretty much perfect. The point being that John lived on the edge of his imagination, on the edge of our own imaginations, always encouraging us to embrace the change in this world. The policies of Black Spock, the affectionate name that he gave President Obama, or Bernie Sanders, who John supported so passionately he went out and died right before the California primary just to get Steve Gregory to vote for him. Not that I'm questioning the rest of the Bernie supporters out there, but who knows where Bernie would be right now if the rest of you had stepped up your game. Just saying. Which brings me to my favorite thing about John Paris, and that was his optimism. While some of us are weakened by the crushing stupidity out there, the savagery and insincerity that often greets us the moment we walk out the door each day, John was always working a positive angle, refusing to succumb to those crazy people out there doing crazy things, like the Florida man who ate the face of another Florida man, or that other Florida man who just became the Republican nominee for president. And of course, you can't pay tribute to Johnny P. without talking about his affection for the universe we live in and the galaxies far, far away. I'll never forget racing around this very hilltop with John, looking for the best place to watch the Space Shuttle Endeavour arrive on the back of that plane. John was like a little kid in the candy store, or like the adult version of himself in the 99-cent store. Also loved a lot. I will forever miss him calling me up on those random weekday afternoons and asking me with bated breath, "Rich, are you watching the NASA channel?" What channel is that again, John? It didn't matter to John what it was, whether it was a rocket launch or a new series of photographs from the Hubble telescope. It was always breaking news to Johnny P. Now he's out there among the secrets where he belongs. As some of you can see by the grass, or the lack of the grass, we're in the middle of a pretty serious drought, and of course you can't talk about John Paris without at least mentioning that drought. While the rest of us have been merely conserving water, altering our flushing habits, and letting our grass die, John Paris went that extra mile. And by extra mile, I mean sponge baths. Days and days on end. Now again, I'm not suggesting that we all need to march into Jerry Brown's office and demand that there's some kind of John Paris sponge bath proposition on the next ballot, but I think we can adopt a more personal initiative in his absence. To always remember how John saw the world, to appreciate the brevity of life, and to appreciate each other a little bit more each day. I first met John and Lori in 1986, fellow Michiganders, and the first real friends I ever made in this town. And while John's loss will always be felt, our journey with him is not over, because people like John never really leave. They just change shape, allowing us to take them with us wherever we go. And that's why this isn't a goodbye. It's a celebration of John's life and of all the places that we will take him, all the ideas that we will explore with him as that laugh of his rattles around in our minds, reminding us that life is how we see it, not something that happens to us. So here's to you, Johnny P. Safe travels. I forgot the spoon, so we're just going to have to sprinkle them like a condiment.
You need scissors too. The bag's really tough, trust me. Anything sharp.
You got it.
No.
So you planting a tree over there, Richard?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. This is a tipu tree, and it's the hello. It's in honor of John, and we had a dead tree that we just took down a couple weeks ago. So this is the John Paris tipu tree, dedicated to John.
Got it.